And because if we're trying to claim that something is special to dogs, we need to compare them, at the very least, to wolves, to hand-reared wolves. So in this next slide, on the right, you're going to see a person sit down in a chair, and her dog's going to do what her dog chooses to do. And on the left, you're at Wolf Park. And the exact same thing is happening at Wolf Park in one of the wolf enclosures. The woman you see sitting there is Dana Drenzik. I'll set the videos going. The woman you see on the left is Dana Drenzik, who helped raise that wolf. She's known that wolf since the wolf was 10 days old, and they see each other almost every day. They have a very intense relationship. The woman and dog on the right, I don't know them personally. They were just people participating in our studies, people and dogs participating in our studies, and they have the same kind of human and beloved pet relationship that we're accustomed to seeing in our own homes. No, they did not know each other when they were 10 days old. That human did not help raise that dog. I don't know how old that dog was when it came into the human's household, but it would have been later. It would have been at least after weaning, and it could have been a lot later for all I know. So you probably already noticed in the videos while I was talking that the dog showed a lot more excitement and interest in the person than the wolf in his person, even though the example with the dog is not perfect because the dog is clearly disturbed by something in the corridor at a point there. Okay, super simple. Again, you could try this for yourselves when you get home. Well, we are all at home when we get off the lecture. We're just going to measure for this. How much time does the animal spend inside the circle with its person? We're only giving them 2 minutes. So going up the graph, how long the animal spent in proximity to the person. Here's what we find with the wolves. The wolves they're interested in this person. This is an important person for the wolves. They spend about a quarter of that interval, quarter of the 2 minutes inside the circle with their person. But now look at the dogs. The dogs, on average, spend almost the whole 120 seconds. I think it came out on average to like 118 seconds. So almost all the dogs spend almost all their time inside the circle with their human. And so this is an enormously big deal for me because I have repeatedly been comparing dogs and wolves and repeatedly failing to find any difference. Anything to do with intelligence, to do with smarts, to do with cognition, I cannot find a difference between dogs and wolves. Or if I do, then it looks like the wolves are actually doing better than the dogs, not the other way around. But here, with this unbelievably simple test, which I should mention was introduced to us by an Argentinian friend, Mariana Bentasela, this unbelievably simple test, and suddenly we get massive differences. And I'm not going to fill you in on everything we've done of this type, but we've done a number of tests trying to measure dogs and wolves' attraction towards the people that they know. And again and again and again, the dogs show way more interest, way more affection towards their people than the hand-reared wolves do. We then also collaborated with a geneticist who had identified some zones of the dog genome that showed evidence of having been under intense selection in recent times. Recent for evolution means thousands of years. So Bridget van Holt at Princeton University had already identified zones of interest in the dog genome where we might expect to find changes. And we sent her DNA samples from the dogs and the wolves that we tested. And she was actually able to pin down 3 genes in dogs that help account for the difference in affectionate drive between dogs and people. And geneticists have no obligation to come up with catchy names for their genes. So these 3 are called WBSCR17, GTF2I, and GTF2I-RD1. And it's very difficult to come up with any illustration of genetics, but this is just a plot showing the correlation between 2 of those 3 genes and the behaviors of interest. So we can see how dogs care for people in their behavior. That behavioral difference shows up in the genetics, the genetic differences between wolves and dogs. And so, for example, Professor Gregory Burns at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, has trained dogs to lie still in brain scanners, in MRI scanners. And by doing that, he's able to actually see the activation in the dog's brain when the dog is reminded about their beloved human by being shown a signal that means your human is just around the corner. And they can see how the dog's reward centers light up. For most dogs, the reward centers light up more when they're reminded of their beloved human than when they're shown an alternative signal that means you're just about to receive a piece of sausage. So for many of us, our dog loves us more than our dog loves sausages. I keep saying dogs have an exceptional ability to love people, but I'm going to contradict myself now because I don't think that dogs are born wanting to love people. I think dogs are born with an exceptionally open program to love anything that crosses their paths in the first couple of months of life. We see this in dogs loving us because we are human, and that is the lives that our dogs lead. They live with us and we see them loving us. But if your dog had been born on a farm and had grown up around many different species of animal, you would see your dog seeking out affectionate bonds with these many different species. This occurs most commonly in the dogs we call livestock guarding dogs, dogs who take care of livestock on ranches, most commonly goats and sheep, although sometimes cattle, sometimes horses. I wanted to see this for myself, having never come across it. And so I found some goat ranches in the northeast of Arizona, and I went out and visited with them where I saw this. Here is a beautiful picture of David and Catherine Henniger's goat, Tarragon, resting with her kid. You can see there's a young goat in there as well, resting on one of their livestock guarding dogs, Pierre. Now, why does Pierre have such a strong relationship with the goats? It's very simple. You just put the dog in the goat barn when it's a puppy, and it will grow up expecting, seeking strong emotional bonds with goats, the way that we are more accustomed to seeing dogs seeking strong emotional bonds with us. So I have seen this for myself. The example that I think is the cutest example I have ever heard of comes from Australia, where there's an island just offshore in the southeast of Australia called Middle Island that has a penguin colony on it. And unfortunately, at certain times of year, the tide goes out so far that foxes have been able to get out onto Middle Island and have repeatedly decimated the penguin population. That is until a local chicken farmer who goes by the name of Swampy Marsh suggested to the city authorities that they should try putting livestock guarding dogs out on Middle Island. He had dogs guarding his free-range chickens. He said, if the dogs can form a relationship with the chickens, why shouldn't they be able to start caring about penguins? And so that's exactly what they did. And as I say, I haven't seen this for myself yet, but it has to count as the cutest example I have ever heard of dogs caring for members of other species. These dogs love their penguins. Okay, finally, I want to tell you about some new research from my group where we've been looking into how far does dogs' concern for people actually go? And there are many stories, you know, the old Lassie story, what's that, Lassie? Timmy's falling down the well. Well, clearly that's fiction, right? No dog can bark out clearly what on earth has happened. But what would a dog do if its person was in distress? And so in this video, which I'll show you brief highlights here, you can see here a box. In that box is this dog's special human. And she is crying out in distress from inside that box. The box is actually very easy to open, and we're interested to see, will the dog do something to rescue her human? We can tell the dog is upset. So in this case, the dog does rescue the human. I would be dishonest if I claimed that a majority of dogs rescue their humans under this condition. But we've done several control tests, and we know that the problem here is that even though we designed the box to be very easy to open, it's actually too challenging for most dogs who have not been trained what to do. Remember, that's an important consideration here. It's actually too challenging for most dogs. But the dogs that understand how to open it, they do open it to let their people out.